On to this story now. South Africa will be entering a 21-day lockdown period from midnight tonight. Now, one Labour lawyer says companies can force employees to take annual leave during the lockdown. Sherisa Rajah says this is beneficial to employees as the company is lending them leave. She joins us via Skype now. Sherisa, good morning to you. Firstly, I want to start with the workers at South African Express who were told just days after the lockdown period was announced that their salaries will be delayed. What recourse do these workers have?
So in the event your salary is delayed without any process being followed, then you have a recourse to go to the Department of Labour and claim that I have not been paid. You could also bring an urgent claim before the Labour Court under Section 77 of the Basic Conditions of Employment Act to claim breach of a provision or failure to comply with the provisions of the contract of employment.
Now, the urgency of this during the lockdown period, I simply cannot see that particular employee winning just before we go into a lockdown.
Yeah, look, right now the courts are all essentially on online services. There are core services happening, but we've all been given directives from the judges saying that courts are not in action or in process right now, and that extends to the CCMA, and other collective bargaining tribunals as well as the courts.
Sherisa, then you say that companies can actually force employees to take annual leave during this 21-day lockdown period. How is this beneficial to workers? Perhaps let's start there.
Okay, well, there's been a lot of controversy around it in that employees are very upset by the fact that, companies are now coming in saying, I'm taking your annual leave days, and this might impact travel plans over Easter, over Christmas, etc. But the one thing that's not being communicated to the employees so that they understand where this comes from is that in a space of lockdown, what is ultimately happening is that the government has declared a state of disaster. That means if I'm an employer, I cannot accept your tender of service. It would be enforcing an illegal act right now. Therefore, in law, what we've all agreed is that this is essentially a supervening impossibility of performance, meaning that you can't perform and I can't accept the tender of your performance unless you sit in Annex B to the Gazette, which is an essential service. Now, if that is the case, that means technically I could consult with you on a very high level and implement a layoff because there's no work and therefore there would be no pay due to you.
Yeah.
Most employers are not doing that. I would dare to say all employers that I'm aware of are not doing that. Everyone has come up with some or other creative solution, and the easiest or the lowest of those hanging fruits are the grants of annual leave, because employers owe employees annual leave anyway, and during this period of lockdown, you remain an employee, so you are still accruing annual leave days. As a result, I could place you on annual leave, let you run into a negative balance whilst you're still accruing and setting off that negative balance during this period.
I'm quite keen to hear what that negative balance will do then come the time that I actually want to take the annual leave, say in December, for example.
Yeah, look, if you look at the number of days, so employees get 15 business days annual leave in an annual leave cycle. Now, an annual leave cycle is 12 months of continuous employment with the employer, structured on a calendar year basis or on the anniversary of your contract it renews. You only accrue it with service. For an employer to come forward and say, notwithstanding the downturn in my business, the impact on my cash flow, I'm willing to pay you for that period, is a very big thing. It's a very positive thing, and we are doing our level best as lawyers to encourage employers to find these solutions. The reality, though, like you rightly say, is that as a consequence of that, you would spend the next remainder of the year earning those days back to the employer. Now, that means in a consultative process with your employer, you are within your rights to say, I don't want the annual leave deduction, but you need to understand what that means. If you're saying that, you're essentially saying, I'm okay to go on a layoff, to lay me off. I'll claim from the Unemployment Insurance Fund and take my chances there, and I'd rather have my annual leave over December. Those are the two core options available to employees right now, so that they contextualize where the annual leave comes from.
Yeah, and then you say that for essential service workers, as is expected and has been explained to us over the number of days, they are going to be on full duty during this lockdown period unless the conditions are either harmful to their health or they pose a danger to their safety. What kind of conditions are we talking here?
Okay, I love the way you've summarized it. It's so perfect. That's exactly right. The conditions would be the pandemic plans that employers have put in place over the last 2 weeks. Now, because you're an essential service, which has been defined under the Gazette as food, cleaning and hygiene, and medical, fuel and basic goods, including airtime and electricity, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's work as usual. That means that all the obligations imposed on the employer under the Health and Safety Act, which are heightened obligations because we're in a state of a declared national disaster, would need to remain in place. In other words, if you're working a call center in one of these sectors, private security, etc., what would happen is we would still continue with a rotational shift, keeping spatial distancing, ensuring that communal areas are highly sanitized and cleaned regularly, that rather than having the mugs, etc., we have disposable or paper cups of whatever nature in place. Any measure that can be deemed to keep that environment safe and healthy for the employees who are still tendering service during this period must continue and may well have to be heightened in this period because of the vast number of local transmissions we're seeing right now. We're averaging somewhere between 50 and 100 new infections on a daily basis since Wednesday, I think it is, and I stand to be corrected.
Yeah.
But as a result, the employer would need to make sure that the occupational health and safety obligations are heightened and are implemented almost to the point that anyone who breaches those obligations whilst tendering service would stand to be disciplined in this period of time.
Sherisa, I must thank you very much for that explanation. I would have wanted to ask you another question, but time is against us, so let's leave it there for the moment. Sherisa Rajah, she is a labour lawyer.